All right, well, welcome, everybody. We may still be waiting on a few. It's right at 7 o'clock, but we're gonna do things a little bit differently this year. For those of you who are used to our regular format, we are not going to break for snack. We just have snacks available. So I brought that tonight. So at any point, you are welcome to get up and get some either at the start or halfway through, or take it all at the end. I don't care, but it's there for you to enjoy. We have some pumpkin snickerdoodle cookies, some crackers and cheese and meat trays, and some fruit. So, and so speaking of, we do kind of share a snack sign up. And so at least for the first couple of weeks anyway, and then we may need to rotate again. I'm going to pass this around, and if you would sign up for a week to bring something light like that, for the group. I don't know how many we'd have tonight, so it looks like we got 7 or so in person. So maybe a few more will show up over the time. I know Susan couldn't make it tonight because she's feeling sick, and Mary couldn't make it tonight. So probably for about 10 people we'd have. So I'm going to pass this down this way with the dates on it and a pen, if you should need it. And then the other thing that we do before we get any further, I want to welcome Steve. Welcome. Steve's joining us this year for the first time, and Sharon is here with us this year. So welcome, Sharon. And so do we want to go around and just share names? Oh, and my dad's joining us. He's been here in the past, but he's now here. I'm here. This is Cameron.
That was your brother.
He's been on Zoom before, but that was years ago. So yeah, so he's here now. This is Cameron. So
Does he speak Southern?
Midwest.
Well, they tell me I sounded up here,
Okay.
but when I go back down there, they tell them I'm from up here. So I'm just,
Lost
Lost in the middle.
No man land.
No, man. So why don't we start and just kind of share your name and maybe about how long you've been involved with Northwest. So I get the folks to start on Zoom, and Steve, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hi. I've been in Dublin, Ohio since 1987, born and raised in northern Indiana. First 6 years I went to Presbyterian church. I don't remember much about it, but I remember there were some things that are different. Sometimes I still want to say trespasses instead of sins. Sometimes it still pops in my head. Just things of that nature. And I became a member of Northwest United Methodist Church shortly after I came to Columbus in 1987, and my wife Janine and I were married there 28 years ago, and our daughter, who is 26, has been through all the classes and everything at Northwest United Methodist Church. In fact, Pastor Mebane just married her and my new son-in-law in May, and Brian was the organist. So we have a long history. My wife is the Alder Guild member for the church. So we come as often as we can. We do have a place at the lake that we go to during the summer, so we don't always show up during the summer if we've got people coming over there. But and I'm glad to be here tonight. We were watching. The reason I'm here is because probably too much more you want to know. But we were watching a show about David, and it occurred to me that, boy, there's a lot of things I've forgotten about Samuel. I went to a Methodist-based college, Taylor University, if you've ever heard of it. And you don't come away from there without reading the Bible 2 or 3 or 4 times, but it's been a long time since I remembered anything about Samuel. Saul, a different story. Saul is different. So I'll just shut up there and say that's me and my background.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Steve's wife, Janine, if you've seen the displays on the altar for, any of the special seasons in the church, that the big tomb that we put up for Easter and everything, that's all her. She does all of that. So she does the table centerpieces and the Ministry Center and everything. So, hello, Harry.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome.
I was gonna
Um,
run over, but I decided that I wasn't ready to run yet.
No, I would have driven if I were you. But, you know.
An automobile.
We're just sharing, we're going around the room, the circle to share our name and about how long we've been involved in the church. So I'm going to go to Kent and Terry now. Share with us. I know I'm saying your names, but tell us who you are and your involvement in the church here.
Oh, me? I'm Harry Noyes.
Kent and Terry. We're going to go to Kent and Terry. You guys hear us?
They had something wrong there.
You guys are muted. There you go.
There we go.
There we go. Is that good? Good?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Kent, and this is Terry, my wife. We joined the church sometime in 21, I think it was. Make sure, I gotta get my facts straight. And we're native from Ohioans. We spent a couple of years down in South Carolina and moved back up to be closer to the grandkids. So here we are.
Fantastic. All right, Harry.
Yeah, I'm Harry Noyes. I've been a member for, gee, I can't believe it, almost 20 years. Doesn't seem possible. But we came to Ohio years ago. We were only gonna be here a year until the grandkids were born. And that was 20 years ago, so we were actually headed for the Carolinas, but we never got there. So that's okay, though. We're good.
I hear you. I was only gonna be here 3 years, Harry. That was
I know.
almost 10 years ago, so.
I know the feeling.
Let's go
Before
this
it was
way.
too hot.
I'm Ed Emerson, and I moved here in 2010 to be near my grandchildren and wound up my law practice at our Columbus office. I spent most of my career in Toledo. But it's been amazing watching this community grow. And I shopped around for different churches and saw this one up on the hill here and started going. And I guess I became a member, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. But I feel like it's family now. I enjoy singing in the choir with Jane and the other choir members. They're like family. And so that's pretty much my story. My wife isn't very mobile, but I can't get her to go on TV. But she's waiting for me to get home, and I must take one of those cookies, whatever they were, Snickers.
Please do.
Or I won't get in the house.
I'm Sharon Toth, and I have been coming to Northwest for, I hate to say it now, 24 years. So I first came to Columbus for school and ended up meeting my husband here and staying, leaving for a little bit and then coming back, and just really enjoyed Northwest and looked at a few different churches along the way over the years, but always just kept coming back here, and my children love it here. And this is always where they want to come. So we've just been here ever since. And then when my parents moved down here to be closer to the grandchildren, they really enjoyed it as well. And we're here as well. So that's why we're here and have really enjoyed it and gotten involved in different ministries throughout the years.
Fantastic. And Sharon's daughter, Lauren, is a senior this year.
She is, yeah. She just went to her first OSU class. So through the school districts, they can attend college classes for free. So she signed up for a few at OSU. So made it down there, had to drive herself, get on the bus from the commuter lot, but made it. So we were successful. Worried, but we did it.
Well, you all know me. I'm Pastor Chris. You can just call me Chris, really. Doesn't matter to me. Whatever will get my attention. And so I've been here now for 8 years, I think. 8 years, I think. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because it was summer of 2017 that I first started at the church. So yeah, it's been 8 years. And, it's been a wild ride, but I really enjoy Northwest. There's really not quite a church like Northwest. You know, I've served in several different churches and grew up in different churches, and it really is something special. So I'm glad to be here. Don't let anybody else ever tell you otherwise. So.
I'm Cameron Rinker. We moved up last September from North Carolinas. Be closer to our grandkids, and we take him along with the grandkids. We didn't look at any other churches because we heard this one had a pretty good past.
Wonder why.
So, we're enjoying our time here. I am thoroughly enjoying the weather.
It's like this all the time.
You weren't
Till
here
winter
last
time.
week. Well, what you guys thought was hot.
Yeah.
I'll admit it was hot. But when you have that from Memorial Day to about the second week of September, it gets pretty old.
Her son was here about 3 weeks ago and he lives in Florida,
Yeah.
just north of Orlando. And he said, this is hot.
Yeah.
No.
So-
He said, you don't know humidity.
Yeah, so we're enjoying it though. Had the windows open and everything, and we're enjoying being able to be around Chris and family and the grandkids and this church is wonderful. And I'm not saying that because he's here. So.
Jane Curry and Roger and I joined this church in 1978. And with our 3 young children, we started church here and never even considered looking anywhere else. And I was born a Methodist, always will be a Methodist. So thank God that it's been a blessing for sure. And we certainly are blessed to have the leadership of people like Chris. He's just been so dear to me, certainly this last couple of years, and beyond that, way back when we started having Bible study and getting to know him as a minister, preaching on Sundays, just terrific, and just so thankful to have the choir and the leadership with the lovely people in that choir and how much we truly love to sing praises to the Lord. So I'm just thankful to be here and so glad to have all of you here tonight too.
And I'm Carol Estelle.
Yeah.
This is Bill.
Bill.
And we are among some of the very oldest members of this church.
I came to Columbus, Ohio in December of 1950.
When he was born.
That's my cross. And then, and I joined the church,
16.
I think in 69, either 68 or 69.
Wow, big man.
And I actually started attending in 73 when we were dating, and I would come to his parents every other weekend from Eastern Ohio. And I've been here permanently since the end of 74 when we got married. So we're going on 51 years of marriage. So we raised our 2 children here, our youngest of which just turned 44 yesterday. I came from a Methodist church in Eastern Ohio that became United Methodist when they joined up with the UB, and
We've been on
Methodist forever.
the Board of Trustees,
Mission committee.
Medicine Committee, Carol's taught,
Bible school.
Bible.
Disciple.
Disciple.
Bible
I've
study.
taught Bible studies, Sunday school, youth group.
Yeah, we worked with youth group way back. Brown bag now,
Yeah,
Manna Cafe.
Hotshot
Bill's
greeters.
the main cook
Do
for
what?
Manna Cafe.
You're hotshot greeters.
well,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, it's
I've
been
been reading for, I don't know how long now,
Yeah,
and that's good, that's a good thing.
we enjoy doing that.
So it's a good church, we've seen, pastors come and go and programs come and go. And right now, currently, I think we've got as much outreach going on as I've ever seen
Yeah,
It's one.
yeah.
in the church, and plenty of opportunities for people to get involved in something.
And we've seen the attendance peak and drop off, and it's on its way back up. It's been on its way back up for a while now. And younger people.
Oddly enough, Roger was with Roscoe Village when they got married. He did their wedding reception.
No, not the reception, the rehearsal.
Their
dinner.
rehearsal, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
At
the
the
warehouse
warehouse
restaurant in
restaurant,
Roscoe Village.
We didn't know them then.
That's where we came from and belonged to the Methodist church there.
Yeah.
Long ago, but wonderful year.
Yeah, we didn't know you then. We found that out many years later.
Funny.
Well, welcome everybody. There's one more item of business before we get started, and don't worry, I've baked in plenty of extra time to the schedule for the fall semester. So if we don't finish all 3 chapters tonight, it's not a big deal. So, but I did want to just mention that this group every year is responsible for the Christmas families that you may have seen out in the hallway that we do at Christmas time, signing up for gifts and whatnot. So I talked to Jackie and Beth. They usually come on Zoom, but they're gonna take a break from the Bible study, but not the Christmas families this year. So they are still on board with the Christmas families. So, but as part of that, and it's okay if you don't have anything tonight, because I didn't tell you about it. But we usually take up $1 a week. And that goes towards a fund that will help to purchase any gifts that may not get taken care of by the rest of the congregation. So if you have $1 to drop in,
And if we want to pay.
you want to put the whole thing in, it's 16 weeks technically. Sometimes people just drop a 20 in. I don't have it on me tonight. I should have come more prepared, but I will. But that just kind of goes into a pool for a fund that helps to pay for gifts. And if you're joining on Zoom, if you want to come, to Denise, Reagan-Bogan, our finance person, who will also help with Christmas families, and she's part of this group too, although she's not on tonight. You can do that, or you can send it in online and just mark that it's for Christmas families. So that's what we do. All right, and that will be probably you all will start getting together and contacting in like a month or so.
Well, we had an original, initial meeting to finalize last year and to step forward. So,
Oh, fantastic.
but we'll probably have one late September.
Yeah, all right, sounds good. And so we'll keep you updated on that. Part of that involves contacting the families, so they'll get information from the Church for All People and Amethyst House, and some of the families around here, I think, too. And then we'll have folders and we can contact them and interview the families to see what they want, what their kids want for Christmas. So, all right. Well, without further ado, let's pray. Good and gracious God, we thank you for this time to come together tonight as your people, focused on worshiping you and learning more about you and the history of your people, Israel, and diving into your word, oh God, growing closer together in love for one another. Open our minds and our hearts to hear what each one has to say so that we can sharpen one another and learn more about our faith and grow in our spirituality. We love you, God. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name, through whom we pray. Amen. Okay. All right, so 1 Samuel. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm excited to get into it. There's a lot here. And this was originally just all one scroll. So it wasn't 1st and 2nd Samuel, it was just Samuel. And it wasn't until I think the 15th century or so that they started printing it into first and second parts. Interestingly, Second Samuel doesn't feature Samuel at all. So, but they kind of just broke it right at the point of Saul's death. So that's where we will end up. And it will be before kind of the official crowning of David as king. So, a few other things to note, the time period, we're probably talking about 1000 BC or so, for when all of this takes place. The authorship of the book is heavily disputed, and you don't really need to worry about that. It's been, biblical scholars have been for centuries arguing about who wrote it. Essentially, we don't, it's anonymous. There's not a name, but it was some Israelite historian that probably wrote all the events down. And then they argue about when they wrote it down. But, these things often are first passed down orally through oral history. So they're telling the story before it gets written down, right? But there's somebody somewhere in a court in Israel that decided to write down the story of what happened with David. And this is really David's story. I know it's called Samuel, but it's really David's story. So that's where we're going. So our format is really going to be to read part of the text. And then I have a few discussion questions for us based on each of that part, and that will hopefully generate some discussion and we can get going. And if there's, something that you want to bring to the group, you don't have to raise your hand. I think we're beyond that at this point. So, all right. But I will ask you all to read. So you may want to, in the future, go home and read ahead to see which parts have really long names and that you want to avoid. So, we're going to start though in chapter 1 and verses 1 through 8. And I'm going to ask if anybody would like to read for us.
Sure, I will, Steve.
Thank you.
So I'm reading from King James. That's all I've ever read.
Okay.
And mine says the book was originally called the first book of the Kings. Is that something that is known as? I kind of completely have forgotten that, but it says right here, originally called first book of Kings. Chapter 1, now there was a certain man of Ramathan Zophim, which I think that you're talking about. That map you sent was Ramathan, right?
Yes, if you look at the map, you can say, Ramathaim or Ramathaim or however you say it.
Yeah,
Kind of right there in the middle of Ephraim.
right. Of
That's-
Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elakanan. Is that right, Chris? Elakanan?
I think it's Elkanah.
Elkanan, the son of Jeroham, and the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, Z-U-P-H, and Ephraite. That's the hardest I think it gets. But he had two wives. The name of the first one was Hannah. The name of the other was Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh, which is also on your map. It's on, I think maybe it's Jordan River or some tributary of the Jordan River.
Mhm.
And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. So Eli was the priest of the Lord, and the two sons were Hophni and Phinehas, I think.
Yep.
And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all of her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary, which I believe was probably his other wife, I suppose, her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went to the house of the Lord, Shiloh. So she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Achanan, her husband, to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons?
Thank you, Steve. Wow, so starting right off with a pretty serious issue, which is infertility. Um, and Hannah's unable to have children. And her sister wife, because at this time, this was fairly common for men to have multiple wives. It was not yet established that monogamy was the sole way that you would live your life and your marriage. So there's no judgment put here on Elkanah for having two wives, but there's enmity between Peninnah and Hannah. And I just wanted to ask, how do you think that it's changed between biblical times and now, the way that we view infertility? And how do you feel about this being in this text, sort of, it's being presented as a result of God's will. The Lord enclosed her womb. And that's
The story reminds me of Sarah and Hagar.
mm,
And of course, Hagar had a child, and I think she kind of lorded that over Sarah. And I think it'd be 40 miles off on this, but I think the Lord closed Sarah's womb as well as here as a test of faith, perhaps. And of course, eventually we know Sarah had a child, and of course we read through and Hannah has a child. But I don't know, maybe it was a test of faith in today's world, I don't know. But usually when guys sit around and talk in their circle, we don't discuss whether or not woman's womb is open, closed, any of those kinds of things. It's more about who won the game and where are you going fishing next week or something.
And having children might have been viewed as a necessary
The duty.
occurrence to propagate the people of the group so they can live on for more generations. And Chris asked how that relates to today. I think, and this is just personal from an old man, I would like to see our kids get busy and make some babies. I've got grandchildren that are well equipped to have babies and they aren't having them. But I think that's changed. I hope it changes because we have a population crisis here in the United States. Not as bad here as China and other countries. But I think back then even, I think there was a societal obligation to make babies. So a woman whose womb was closed, you know, that was a little problem for her and people would, you know, how's she helping, you know, and sad but true.
I thought it was interesting, the difference, the female versus the male perspective, that the woman feels like it's her, I think, I mean, she didn't eat and she was very distraught that she couldn't have children. But what's interesting is the last line, don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? So I think, and I still think that probably exists to a certain extent today, that there are certain, there is still a certain aspect that women feel it's our duty to have children or it's our job to have children. If you can't do that, to a certain extent, there may be this idea that I've failed as a woman
Mm.
because I can't have children.
Mhm.
And that may not necessarily be how the male feels. And so even in this, even going back to biblical times, I don't know that, I mean, he certainly didn't think anything less of Hannah, at least from what we're reading right here, because she couldn't have children and he was very concerned about her not eating. I mean, bringing her more portions and things like that. So I just thought that was an interesting perspective there. Because I do think there was this idea that women should have children and that was put on them your job was to have children, but maybe he didn't, maybe that was more an internal thing from her perspective.
I think in those times too, that children, big families were required to run the herds and
Absolutely.
farm and whatever else, the family business. And I think women today are career minded. I know we have a daughter that she said, I'm not gonna have any children.
She said that long before she was married.
She had a career doing, her and her husband, they travel all over the world, do bird research and whatnot. And I said, you either have that lifestyle or you have children, but you won't have both, one or the other. And so she chose to go that direction. And I think a lot of our articles I've read in my newspaper that I get, it is a crisis. The population is down. And not only in this country, but elsewhere in the world.
And I think the difference is, Hannah wanted a child. Today. You're right. A lot of kids don't want a child. Our youngest doesn't want a kid, right? Maybe just not yet. But Hannah wanted a child. And, looking at things in hindsight, she was really frustrated. And I think it was, the thing that's common is everything is in God's time. I think God was withholding a child, if he was, so that when she did have a child, she was going to sacrifice or give um, Samuel up to the church. But maybe she had to get to the point where, okay, if she just had a bunch of kids, would she have done that? I don't know if she would. And if you read further along, you can see that he did open up her womb and she had what, 3 sons and a couple of daughters too. So it's just a matter of, God's time is not necessarily our time. And if you go look back historically, you can say, okay, now I see why maybe, but in the time, it's got to be very, very difficult. I mean, we see that today too, among all kinds of, how come I can't get an answer? Well, either you have the answer and the answer is no, or you just have to wait for, the answer. But that's what I see here with Hannah. It's kind of a little bit thing with Sarah. Oh, Sarah waited until what, she was 180 years old or something. She wanted a kid too. Yeah.
Well, and then they had the child and God told Abraham to sacrifice him.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
willing to do that
Yeah.
until the last moment. And
Well, he was willing to do it even up to
Well-
through the last moment.
well, I mean, he was
But
ready to
God's
plunge the knife, but
I can't imagine. I can't even imagine
well,
that.
no, and she gives up her child to the Lord. And is it the sacrifice that God made, giving up his son to come to the earth? Is it, do they parallel one another? I don't know.
There's, I know of some folks who have struggled with infertility and, because of that, that's completely ruined their faith and their relationship with God because, how could God do this to me? And I know that's a very hard thing. And I'm wondering, how do we as the church, how do we come around people with fertility issues and care for them? Is it maybe a good idea to point them to these kinds of stories or no? Like Sarah and Hannah.
They're never going to be able to because of the physical nature of it. Maybe not so good. We don't know why Hannah didn't have kids, why all of a sudden she did. Um, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to give anybody some false hopes, I guess, Pastor Chris.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
There's certainly lots of infertility support out there if you
Mhm.
need that kind of support.
Mhm.
And it never hurts to know stories like this that are in a Bible that we love to read.
Mm.
But basically, it is a big heartbreak.
Mhm.
I went through that with a sister for a number of years, and then praise the Lord, we had 3 very successful children together.
I was gonna say, that, can't put myself necessarily in my wife's shoes, but I know she would have been heartbroken if she couldn't have had children. And I would think that from a female standpoint, whether it was this time period or now, if they really want to have children and not able to, that would be the same emotional um, down or stressed or that would affect the female. And obviously you guys wouldn't have Chris if we couldn't have had any. So, but what's different, we've kind of pointed it out, and from this time to that time is we have ladies who choose to be in the workforce. And rightfully so, they're good at their jobs. Whether they choose to have kids and do the job or choose their career, that's up to them. And they make that choice. And that's got to be a really hard, I would think, a really hard choice. They have that choice now. Back then, they didn't have that choice. And even when this country first started, they didn't have that choice because, as you pointed out, kids were the labor. Yeah, they worked the farms, they worked, they needed to. And there's still some of that here in our society. But what's interesting that you point out, Sharon, right? That the husband is saying, but don't you love me, versus having 10 kids. That's rare from what I've read at this time period, because legally, because she was barren, he could divorce her and just put her out on the street with nothing. And he chose not to, and cared for her and wanted her to eat. So we had a neighbor back in North Carolina that had wanted children, and she ended up having 3, but it was a struggle. It was fertility shots every single time. And you had one child, I think that was, when we left, was 10 or 11, and her next one was 4. And she finally had another so, lots of time between her kids. But I think, if somebody here, as you were pointing out, is to encourage them to find ways to possibly conceive, but also there's a lot of kids out there that need a parent.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
I have another friend that she couldn't have children, and that she and her husband adopted 2 children. So those are other avenues to talk to folks about that. And my wife, being a retired pediatrician, will point out that she had a lot of patients that were not able to have children. They adopted, and as soon as they adopted a child, the woman conceived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like all the pressure was off.
I worked with a woman that happened.
So
I have a neighbor
Chris,
that had that happen twice, and they adopted African-American children. Family is just amazing.
so I think
I think it goes back to was it Steve at the top?
Steve, yeah.
I think what you said was very good about it. Things happen in God's time, and if you were to counsel somebody who is going through infertility, pointing out these stories certainly can be an example of that. But I think the take-home point isn't necessarily that God cures infertility, but rather things happen in God's time, and whatever reason that may be. So your wife's a pediatrician, my husband's a pediatrician. There are many children out there who need a home, and while I am fortunate to have my own children, I would gladly have taken home many children that I saw in my training as a pediatrician as well. And that's where I met my husband. So I think there are many children out there who easily, I think there are other avenues for becoming a parent besides, you know, just having your own children. So I think there's ways that you could counsel them. And I think that's the point of the story, is not necessarily that God will let you have your children, because that isn't always how it works, but you can still become a parent, and there are many children out there that need a loving home.
Second Corinthians talks about why, why do we suffer, or why do people go through suffering, so that they can help others that go through the same thing.
That's that's the idea of the wounded healer. Henry Nouwen has a book on that.
I think the other thing too, in today's society, we used to be an agrarian society, and everybody worked on the farm and so forth. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and people started moving towards the cities and factories. But right up through the 50s, a family was able to live. The mother could stay home, run the household, raise the children, and dad would go to work. And in those days, homes were inexpensive enough that you could afford it, and wages were comparable enough that you could afford to raise a family. You can't do that today. You just can't do that today. And childcare has gotten so expensive.
Oh, wow.
I think we could, spend probably the rest of the time on this, but I want to move on. I would definitely, if it was somebody that I was counseling, never tell them that God was somehow involved in doing this to them. I think there's some things that are, and I would tell them, I think God grieves with them, the not having a child. But I think, inviting them to pray about, just like you said, what can you and God do together next? I think that's a good course of action. So they're going to Shiloh. Shiloh is where the Ark of the Covenant is, and that's where the Israelites worshipped at this time. It's not in Jerusalem yet. And so that is where Eli, the priest, is based with his two sons. And so we're going to read about Hannah's, call it Hannah's bargain here in the next section. Would somebody read for us verses 9 through 20?
Read. One time after eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah got up and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting in the chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Hannah was very upset and couldn't stop crying as she prayed to the Lord. Then she made this promise: Lord of heavenly forces, just look at your servant's pain and remember me. Don't forget your servant. Give her a boy. Then I'll give him to the Lord for his entire life. No razor will ever touch his head. As she kept praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was silent. So Eli thought she was drunk. How long will you act like a drunk? Sober up, Eli told her. No, sir, Hannah replied. I'm just a very sad woman. I haven't had any wine or beer, but have been pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think your servant is some good-for-nothing woman. This whole time I've been praying out of my great worry and trouble. Eli responded, Then go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you've asked from him. Please think well of me, your servant, Hannah said. Then the woman went on her way, ate some food, and wasn't sad any longer. They got up early the next morning and worshiped the Lord. Then they went back home to Ramah. Elkanah had sex with his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, which means I asked the Lord for him.
Okay, thank you. All right. And so I think this is kind of funny that Eli thinks she's drunk while she's praying. But what do you think of this deal that Hannah makes? And I'll note that I, you know, I mean, it does work, right? But do you think that God, I don't know, I call this the vending machine God. You put something in, you get something out. And that's not the kind of God I believe in, because God is relational. You know, God is not transactional. But a lot of people feel this way. And especially when things get tough and people get into situations of, you know, where they've got a terminal diagnosis or something like that, you can see it's one of the stages of grief, right? Bargaining, right? You can see this a lot. And so, how do we feel about Hannah's bargain? Do you think God would have answered her prayer if she hadn't, you know, made the bargain, or if she didn't follow through with her end of the deal? Or have you ever known anybody that tried to pray in this way? And how would you, I guess, minister to somebody that was kind of seeing God in this way?
I don't believe that she had a child because she offered him to the temple. I think she probably would have had a child anyway. But I think in her mind, after she had done that, she felt like she had to follow through.
I think it's a big thing. If you're bargaining, you better be careful what you promise,
That's right.
right? Because you better, especially with God, I think you better follow through. That's why I agree with Chris. It's not my view of how God's gonna
Mine either.
respond.
I think God saw that she had that deep desire, and she truly was a very devout woman who proved that in many situations that you read on through. I think it was a true gift from God, and I'm not sure whether it really mattered that she bartered with him. It happened, and God has a plan, and this was how it was fulfilled.
I would agree with that. I don't think the bargaining was the reason that she got pregnant. And I think bargaining is actually very common. I think people, it's kind of your first instinct to, right when you get a terminal diagnosis, or I think it's very easy to do that, thinking that things will change. I don't think it works. I don't think I still think it's, again, not knowing what God's plan is very difficult for a lot of people. And I'll admit I've been guilty of it too in my younger days. Just, you know, when I was younger, you know, thinking, well, you know, if just this one thing doesn't happen, you know, I'll do better. I'll do this, or I'll do that. I think that's, you know, I think a lot of people do that. So I think, but I don't think that's why she got pregnant. I think that was part of God's plan, was for her to have a child.
I think you take away the bargaining part, it really showed, you know, with her devotion and to God and praying to God and how sincere she is, God will answer prayers.
Correct. Correct.
So,
Well, Jesus said, you don't receive because you don't ask. And I, going along with what you're saying, I don't think there's a person in this world at one time or another said, God, if you get me out of this jam, I'll never do this for again. I think that's just human nature. And she was very distressed about this whole thing. And of course, you know, we don't know all the ramifications in those days of not being able to have it. Great embarrassment.
I was reading.
Probably not only to her, maybe to her husband as well.
I was reading little booklet earlier today and jumped right off this page as I just studied lesson. The heading is God has a plan, and it's from Ephesians 1:11. In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works everything out in conformity with the purpose of his will. That helps? Yes, right?
Pastor Chris, I have a question. I'm reading in the King James, as I said. And mine says, she says, I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life. And then it says, and there shall be no razor come upon his head. I, you know, Janine and I are looking at that, says, we don't have any idea what that is, what that means. No razor come upon his head. What does that mean?
His haircut.
There, you know the story of Samson?
Yeah,
Yeah, so Samson was dedicated as a Nazarite, and this is what she's talking about with Samuel. He'll be dedicated as a Nazarite, which was sort of like a special dedication of somebody to God, where they would do these, you know, they would have these kind of rules where they couldn't drink and they couldn't shave, they couldn't cut their hair at all. And a lot of the time that was for a period of time. It wasn't their whole life. But in this instance, and with Samson, it was meant to be the whole life. Now, Samson broke his vow by telling Delilah about his hair. But for Samuel, so the intent is that he would be this special category of dedicated to God, the Nazarite, where he didn't have any of these things.
never cut his hair. Okay.
Never cut his hair, yeah.
And First Corinthians, Paul gets into the hair business pretty heavily for both the males and the females. And
I think he takes the vow of the Nazarite too for a couple years.
okay, well,
Yeah.
he teaches that as a man, you never cut your hair. And as a woman, your head always has to be covered. I guess she could cut her hair as short as she wanted, as long as she covered up.
At the end here,
Thank
she names him Samuel, for she said, I have asked him of the Lord. Interestingly, the verb that means to ask sounds a lot more like Saul's name than Samuel's name. So.
In 17, it says Eli answered and said, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your petition that you asked of him.
Mhm.
And, you know, Eli being the priest was blessed by the priest. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. But, or maybe Eli knew something prior to that,
Yeah, we don't know.
being connected with God.
But this is also an explanation, right? An explanation for how Samuel comes to be dedicated to the service of the temple. In this sort of miraculous birth, right? And we've seen that before. And we'll see it again later on in the New Testament. So kind of notice the parallels between Samuel and some of these other characters. Let's go ahead and finish out chapter 1. Be mindful of our time. Who would read the rest of chapter 1 for us?
Then the man named Elkanah went up with all his household to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, I will not go up until the child is weaned, then I will bring him that he may appear before the Lord and stay there forever. And Elkanah and her husband said to her, Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best to you. Remain until you have weaned him, only may the Lord confirm his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with a 3-year-old bull and 1 ephah of flour and a jug of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord in Shiloh, although the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull and brought the boy to Eli. And she said, "O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. For this is my boy, I prayed, and the Lord has given me my petition which I ask of him. So I have also dedicated him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is dedicated to the Lord, and he worships the Lord there."
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Worship the Lord there.
So she's fulfilling her vow, bringing Samuel to the temple at Shiloh and dedicating him to the service of the temple under Eli, the priest. I didn't have a discussion question for this section, but are there any questions on this part or thoughts that come to mind? Or any questions on all of chapter 1?
Once again, I just think that the husband, it seems unusual to me that he was just okay giving away his son. Again, it seems kind of progressive for this time period that, you know, and whether it was his dedication to Hannah, I just feel like this time period, you know, women were more objects, they were supposed to have children, and he seemed to want to do whatever it was that for Hannah that she wanted. So I think that that's interesting because you don't see that a lot in stories. And, you know, he said, whatever, do what seems best to you. I mean, you just don't typically see that.
Mhm.
And it was a male son. Yeah, I mean, it was a male on top of that.
You kind of feel like there would have been a little bit more discussion
Correct.
around it, right?
Right? Yeah, I would have thought so.
Well, and there probably was, it just didn't get reported. That's like Noah's Ark. If you go visit the one down in Kentucky, you can't help but say, there had to be a whole lot more discussion between God and Noah
Oh, absolutely.
about building that thing, and what's it like.
Been put on paper somewhere.
There's a couple things here when Elkanah says, "Only may the Lord establish his word." That's an interesting phrasing and kind of a foreshadowing that Samuel is going to be a prophet, not just dedicated to the temple, but going to be a prophet, because as we'll find out later, and actually we even heard at the end of Judges, it says, "In those days there was no king in Israel. All the people did what was right in their own eyes." That's kind of where the story left off before we pick back up in Samuel. It's important to keep that in mind. The time of the judges was kind of over. Eli is acting as judge, but it's kind of chaos. And we find out later that the word of the Lord was rare. So people aren't really hearing God or listening to God. And so when Elkanah says, "May the Lord establish his word," it's kind of foreshadowing. Samuel's going to be that establishment of God's word among the people. And then at the very end, when it says, "He is given to the Lord," that the word is actually Saul. And so it's actually Saul's name. And kind of tells you that, okay, Samuel and Saul are going to be connected here somehow.
Well, I wonder what help Eli had, because this is a very small boy.
Well, his
he's
sons
taking
certainly
on-
weren't any.
What?
His sons probably weren't any help.
Not
And he's
involved.
taking this young boy on to raise.
Mhm.
He had to have some help.
I'm sure.
Well, he was a priest to the temple.
What?
I'm sure he had staff or somebody.
Well, but I think he was up in years too, by this point in time.
Eli, yeah.
Yeah, he probably had Yeah, there were servants at the temple, we know, and, but yeah, he was up in years. Samuel's been weaned, so we know that he doesn't need, his mother for survival, anymore, so. But now we come to, one of the most beautiful things in the Bible, which is Hannah's prayer. It's chapter 2. And it goes verses 1 through 10. Would somebody read that for us?
And Hannah prayed and said, my heart exalts in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord. There is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, and the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Thank you, Jane. Powerful prayer. What does this say about God?
He's so powerful.
He knows everything.
He's,
He's in total control.
it's like the end of the Lord, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
Amen.
This reminds me of Mary's prayer in Luke called the Magnificat.
Yeah.
After she's learned that she's pregnant with Jesus. And it reminds me of it because you get these reversals in the prayer. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who are hungry are fat with spoil. Mary says he will bring low the haughty and he will lift up the powerless. And it's not just lifting up the poor and the downtrodden, but bringing down the high and the mighty. What do you think about that?
Think about what?
Well, I think this is, maybe we're used to it, but I think it's a unique understanding of God for the time period.
Very revealing.
That, God is not just for the strong, the powerful, and the mighty, but that God lifts up the lowly, and that God is the champion of the underdog. We always like to watch the underdogs, and we love a good underdog story. And that God would lift up those who are poor and downtrodden and on on the margins and forgotten.
Well, and perhaps people at that time would listen to that and say, how can God do that? How can anybody do that? And then you look at Romans 8 and it said, with all things with God, all things are possible with God.
Those who love the Lord.
So maybe, people look, in those days, you were poor. And how could I ever be lifted up as compared to the rich? And maybe that goes on today too. How can I ever be like that? But
You kind of feel like she feels vindicated against, who is it, Panina?
No wonder.
God's been her vindicator.
Yeah, my Bible notes that, Hannah said these words. She was thinking of Peninnah's arrogance and chiding. Hannah did not have to get even with Peninnah. She knew that God is all knowing, that he will judge all sin and pride. Hannah wisely left judgment up to God. So resisting the temptation to take justice into our own hands, God will weigh your deeds as well as those who have wronged you. So I think, I'm not sure I would have been, I might have been taunting Peninnah over there a little bit if I were, I don't know that I could have held back.
well, in verse 2, the praise of God, there is no one holy like the Lord. Indeed, there is no one beside thee, nor is there any rock like our God. And then in verse 3, it says, boast no more so very proudly. Do not let arrogance come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and with his actions, and with him, actions are weighed. So in the one verse, praising God as all powerful, and in the verse number 3, don't think you're up there in that league, because you're not. And whatever you say or do is going to have consequences. Which later on in the scripture talks about every word that was ever murmured.
Chris, I was wondering about the 5th verse. I don't know, I'm missing something there. I'm not sure what he's saying, and I know it's probably very simple, but he says, those who were full hire themselves out for food.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm lost on that one, I guess.
I think she's saying there's a reversal happening, that
Yeah, that's
God
what
makes a reversal. So it's like when Jesus says, blessed are those who are hungry, for they will be filled. And woe to those who are full now, for you will be hungry. It's the same kind of thing. There's a reversal. I've talked about this in sermons before of, where do you want to find yourself on the ladder of life? Because when kingdom come, that ladder is going to be flipped. Right. And so I think it's about not chasing after those things that the world says are important, like, money and status and all this other stuff. And not that you can't have money, but what do you do with it? And
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of, some kind of a, use your term, a reversal.
you
Like
see,
say one thing, but
people
you
out there. Yeah, it's a
mean the
reverse.
opposite.
You see people out there that all they're doing is they just more and more and more. It's like they're devouring it, getting as much as they can. And I'm just thinking, when the kingdom comes, that ladder is going to be flipped. That's what it says. And I know where I want to be. So
I think this prayer is progressive. We said in verse 3, boast no more. And in verse 4, it says, Well, and at the end of 3, and with him actions are weighed, the bows of the mighty are shattered, but the feeble gird on strength. Those who are full are now hiring themselves out for bread. But those who were hungry cease from hungry, that reversal that you were talking about.
Mhm.
And even the barren gives birth to 7, which if we had David here, he could talk about numbers. But-
7 is the perfect, it symbolizes the perfection.
Yeah, perfection.
7 days creation.
But she who has many children languishes. So those people have lived probably a wealthy life. You know, the first shall be last and the last shall be first, sort of thing. So it's progressing onward. And then in 6, and the Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. I mean, he has the power of life and death.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the Lord makes the poor rich, and he brings low, and he also exalts.
Mhm.
He raises the poor from the dust, and he lifts the needy from the ash heap, to make them sit with nobles and inherit a seat of honor. All ranks are going to be leveled in the house of the Lord.
Mhm.
For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he will set the world on them.
You know,
So forth and so
yeah.
on.
I always wonder if, given the state of Israel in these days, we don't really know what else is going on around Hannah. But I imagine it says at the end of Judges, the people had no king and nobody really listened to God. Everybody just kind of did what they wanted. And we know, I mean, if you read the book of Judges, there's a lot of bad stuff that people are doing, and just awful, awful things. And so I'm sure there's probably, and then in short time, the people are going to be calling for a king. So there's probably this anxiety, this angst amongst the people. We need, some justice. We need somebody to make things right, to keep, to keep people from sinning, and so whenever Hannah's prayer is, this is the beginning, because Samuel's the beginning of it. So I want to move on because it's 8:15. And the next one, it's really one unit, but it's a long one. So I'm gonna read it for us here. And we're gonna finish out chapter 2. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah while the boy remained to minister to the Lord in the presence of the priest Eli. Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord or for the duties of the priests to the people. When anyone offered sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is what they did at Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. You know what? I'm gonna paraphrase this differently because it's not written well in our RSV text that I'm reading, just to make it make more sense. So it was the custom that when anyone offered a sacrifice, the priest servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand, and he would thrust it into the pan, and all that the fork brought up, that would go to the priest. This is what they did at Shiloh. This is what they did for everybody who came there. However, in this case, before the fat was burned, the priest servant would come and say to the one who was sacrificing, "Give meat for the priest to roast, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." And if the man said to him, "Let them burn the fat first, then take whatever you wish," he would say, "No, you must give it now. If not, I will take it by force." Thus, the sin of the young men was very great in the sight of the Lord, for they treated the offerings of the Lord with contempt. So they weren't following what was customary. They were supposed to boil all the fat off of the meat first, and then whatever was taken out with the fork, by luck, that would go to the priest for them to eat. But instead, they were coming before they even boiled the meat and saying, I want that piece. The
Yes.
choicest piece. You give it to me or we're gonna take it by force. That was the sin, just in case that wasn't clear. Verse 18, Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy wearing a linen ephod. His mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, May the Lord repay you with children by this woman for the gift that she made to the Lord. And then they would return to their home. And the Lord took note of Hannah. She conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now, Eli was very old. He heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel and how they lay with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meetings. He said to them, Why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all these people. No, my sons, it is not a good report that I hear the people of the Lord spreading abroad. If one person sins against another, someone can intercede for the sinner with the Lord. But if someone sins against the Lord, who can make intercession? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for it was the will of the Lord to kill them. Now the boy Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and with the people. A man of God came to Eli and said to him, Thus the Lord has said, I revealed myself to the family of your ancestor in Egypt when they were slaves to the house of Pharaoh. I chose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to offer incense, to wear an ephod before me, and I gave to the family of your ancestor all my offerings by fire from the people of Israel. Why then look with greedy eye at my sacrifices and my offerings that I commanded, and honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choicest parts of every offering of my people Israel? Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that your family and the family of your ancestors should go in and out before me forever. But now the Lord declares, Far be it from me, for those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be treated with contempt. See, a time is coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your ancestors' family, so that no one in your family will live to old age. Then in distress you will look with greedy eye on all the prosperity that shall be bestowed upon Israel, and no one in your family shall ever live to old age. The only one of you whom I shall not cut off from my altar shall be spared to weep out his eyes and grieve his heart. All the members of your household shall die by the sword. The fate of your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you. Both of them shall die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. I will build him a sure house, and he shall go in and out before my anointed one forever. Everyone who is left in your family shall come to implore him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread, and shall say, Please put me in one of the priest's places, that I may eat a morsel of bread. This is really all one unit about Eli's sons and the fate of Eli's house, with just a little insertion about Samuel and sort of a conclusion to Hannah's story. So Hannah gets a happy ending. She gets to have more children, and she gets to bring Samuel a little robe every year. But with regards to Eli's house and the sin of his sons, and then the pronouncement of judgment by God against him, what do you think about this kind of justice, that it's judgment? It's not just against the 2 that are doing the sin, Hophni and Phinehas, but it's against his whole family, his whole house.
Serious consequences. You and the horse you rode in on, huh? But it was, seemed to be common in biblical times, when the Lord would bring down a people or a group, or in this case, a family. Take the whole family.
As a parent, how do you what do you think about this, where the kids are doing these things, I don't know, they seem to be, they're grown children, right? They're grown up. Cause Eli's old at this point. Um, How do you
Seemed
go
like they've been
about?
doing it for a long time, and Eli didn't do anything about it. And
Yeah.
yes, it does have, I think, pertinence to us today too, as a parent. It's a little scary. What have I allowed or knows what was going on with my kids? They're going against God's will here. It's specific to that time, but it can be related to today. We know what God wants and what God doesn't want us to do. And, as a parent, if I see something that my kid's doing and I don't stop it, am I in the same boat? That's what's scary to me.
Hmm.
Well, back in chapter 1, verse 3, it says Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were the Lord's priests. And
Mhm.
now they're doing this.
Mhm.
Happen
Well, I guess it does, doesn't it?
Mhm.
when you decide to go the wrong way
Mhm.
and take people with you. It sounds like that's what happened. A lot of people follow them because of the sins that they were committing. That became a very major problem and concern for the times, especially for you.
Well, I've got a paragraph in mind that talks about this, and it says, the meeting tent, ancient Israel's place of worship, was the portable shrine housing the Lord's chest. At the beginning of 1 Samuel, it stood at Shiloh, where the elderly Eli and his sons Hophni and Phinehas served as priests. Women also had religious roles at this shrine and were assigned to greet worshipers at the tent's entrance. When Eli's wicked sons abused their position and took sexual advantage of these women, the scandal offended not only the people and their father Eli, but also the Lord. The Lord condemned the house of Eli to destruction as punishment for their abuse of their sacred office. This reminds us that greedy, predatory behavior by people in authority, especially religious authority, is a crime that will not go unpunished.
Mhm.
I think to go along with that, in verse 25, the Lord desired to put them to death. I don't think the Lord desires to put anyone to death.
Mhm.
I don't buy that part, but I think what it's saying, continue on this path. And it's gonna lead to your destruction.
Yeah.
And if you continue this way and you don't repent of your sin, and I think in today's world, we don't ask the Lord to come into our life and be our savior. It's going to be our death. And I don't mean dying a physical death. I mean the spiritual death,
Destruction.
the eternal death.
Exactly.
Eli's family was the chosen family to be the priests of God as the priests for Israel,
Mhm.
right? So Eli, by not showing or disciplining his sons who were supposed to be the priests to take over after his death, he's not showing good character or respect for God and training the future priests to be the priests for Israel. And that goes back to, that can relate to us now, is how are we, so his sons are seeing his actions or lack of action in disciplining them. How are they going to deal with their sons, if they had any? And then that goes to us. How are our children watching us? I won't embarrass you.
You're fine.
Maybe I will.
Well, look at society today.
Well, the kids copy you.
Yes,
Okay?
yes.
As a parent, right? Okay.
And they're copying some bad examples.
Yeah, I'll embarrass your sister. You remember those little tights cars where they can drive and your feet are going like the old Flintstones cars? So my daughter had one of those and she was running up and down the sidewalk and pretending she was driving, and my wife was out talking with a neighbor, and my daughter stopped. And she was pretending that where the sidewalk hit the driveway, that was a stop sign intersection. And all of a sudden, before she started going, she yelled, "Go, you idiot,"
Oh, no.
which is my wife driving. Okay, so they watch, right?
Yeah, they do.
In my opinion, in this one, Eli wasn't careful in doing his discipline or being watched. Not that he did anything, but if he wasn't stopping it said in my notes, he wasn't, not just his sons, but he wasn't stopping the other priests from not doing the sacrifice correctly. So his sons are seeing that, well, he's not stopping them and discipline them. He's not gonna do the same thing, that he's not gonna discipline us, so we can just do whatever.
It seems
So-
like he did try. He maybe
Yeah.
not as forcefully as he should have.
You
but-
wonder, yeah, you wonder about that and whether it's just he didn't try hard enough or early enough, you know, because it says Eli was very old,
Right.
Yeah.
you know.
And they may have felt they were know-it-alls and they could do what the
Yeah.
kids did.
Well, we get,
That died.
Hey, they were the priests, they could do as
Right.
just, yeah.
we only get 4 verses here that talk about this.
Mhm.
There's a whole lot of stuff that may have gone on that we don't know about.
Mhm.
And perhaps he did try to reason with them, and perhaps they were just simply out of control.
I think that was
I mean,
it.
they were adults, right? I mean, they only do so much as a parent and when they're
Yeah.
adults and like you said, I mean, he was older, maybe they were doing things when he wasn't around. Another perspective, I think this whole thing about the whole family being destroyed. And this is very kind of just, you know, as a human, you know, I would be like, wow, you know, this just really stinks, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's those two, they were the ones that screwed up and
Mhm.
you're gonna destroy all of us. And so I think when you go on to chapter 3 and you see what Eli did and was still able to overcome that feeling. I was like, wow, I don't know if I would be able to do that right away, to be able to overcome kind of that anger or that frustration that, hey, my whole family's going to be destroyed. But Samuel, here you go. This is what we need to do. And because I still feel like as I get older, that's things I have to work on, right? To not go with that first instinct of like wanting to be angry or wanting to be like, wow, life's not fair type of thing. And I think that's kind of your first instinct when you read it. For if I was Eli, I'd be like, wow, this just really stinks. It just really kind of stinks that my whole family because of 2 people. But I also think that that's sometimes what life is, right? A couple bad apples ruins everything for everything.
It can destroy a family in the sense that people would be, the stress of 1 or 2 children that are just off the rail could put on the rest of the family, and the aggravation that it creates, and fathers and mothers getting into disputes and arguments about how to discipline the child, or no, we should be lenient, no, we should be tough, and so it can break up a family.
Yeah.
It can break up a family. I'm sure you've probably seen some of that in your counseling and so forth, but
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder that, you know, in a society where we're increasingly becoming more and more individualized, you know, it's all about the I. But it's a good reminder that we are interconnected, you know, with one another, and what one person does, you know, can affect the whole. And when we did Genesis several years ago, we talked about this because in Genesis, before the Noah's Ark story, it talks about how the sin of humanity had corrupted the whole earth. And it's like, well, the animals didn't do anything, you know. But again, it was that point of we're all interconnected, and so the certain darkness that can affect the whole, right? And so I think Samuel's another good example. The book of Samuel is a good example of corporate responsibility, corporate sin. You know, oftentimes we talk about sin in individual terms, but not, you know, societal sin, I guess, systemic sin, and how that can really infect the whole society. So, down the line, they're all gonna ask for a king, and somebody said something to me that I thought was a good point. She said, do you think that everybody wanted a king, or was it maybe just a little bit more than half of them, you know, or somewhere in between? And it says a good point. I mean, Samuel didn't want a king. I bet there were some Israelites that thought this is a bad idea. But the majority of them were saying, we want a king, we want a king. And they're all thrown in together in the same lot of having the king and having King Saul, and all of that resulted from having that. So
Verse 27. Then a man of God came to Eli. Who is this man of God?
that's a good question. Not named.
Who was this guy? And then you go on into 35, but I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according. But I will raise up for myself faithful priest. Is that
A lot of scholars think that
capitalized?
a lot of scholars think that that might be Zadok, the priest that he is raising up. Who Solomon establishes as the priest over the temple in Jerusalem in his house. We are at time, so apologize, we didn't get to chapter 3. We will, but maybe we can start with a short discussion next week, because we did the whole chapter 3 back in July as one of the sermons. So but we can discuss that next week. And like I said, if we fall behind, it's not a big deal. There's some weeks that only have one chapter, so. Are there any other questions or comments in chapters 1 and 2? Well, we always end our time by sharing prayer requests, if there's any prayer concerns that people have. And I'm gonna